Hey everyone, welcome to another week, another exciting Sticky Notes chat. I am Cory Lebson. I'm here with Amanda Stockwell and Chris Nodder for another week, for episode. What are we at now? I don't even recall.
24?
25 actually, aren't we? 25. Wow. Yeah, that's just crazy. Anyway, we're at episode 25 and we're talking about leveling up. We're talking about kind of the continuing story of where we were last week, where we talked about kind of getting started. Now, what's next? How do you grow? How do you move on? How do you move up in your career? So that will be our topic for today. I should also point out that you can comment. We will see it in this stream. Hopefully, we can't promise we're going to get to everything, but we will try to keep an eye on it. And also, you can certainly find us on a number of different channels as well. Sticky Notes Chat. You can tweet at Sticky Notes Chat. You can email. We'll go to all three of us at chat@stickynotes.chat. And am I missing anything? I think the website, of course. The website. You can find all our old episodes.
Oh, that little old place,
You
yes.
know, it's not chat. So you can certainly find us. I encourage you to follow all three of us because we do rotate this stream. We only can pick one person, so we kind of rotate between all of us. If you follow all of us, you will get notified. With some new features, you can actually click in advance and get directly notified. This is the first week that we tried that, so we'll see how it comes out and what people say. Not that we can change it because we are limited by the interface in which we're working. But certainly, certainly that, or we hope that will make things easier in terms of kind of getting pinged when we start up. So, moving on, advancing, all that exciting stuff. Where do we start?
Yeah, you'd think that we might have even discussed this before we went live, right? But
Man,
nah.
what are we talking about again? I don't
Yeah.
know.
So this whole thing, right? It's like you get into your career. I think there might be an expectation when you've been there that like you're going to be in you're going to move through your career really super fast and get to being a super manager position really quickly because you're awesome. But it takes some time to kind of learn the basics of doing UX and to learn enough breadth before you're then in a position where you can really move to the next level. So I guess one of the things that we need to talk about is what it takes for a manager to recognize that you're now at a point in your career where you can take on more responsibility and you can do more stuff. So there's that role moving from being just like a junior user researcher or a junior UX person to being slightly more experienced. But there's also the next stage after that is what does it take to move from being in either an individual contributor role into a management role or in an individual contributor role into more of that kind of architect role. I don't like using that word architect because I'm not sure it really applies, but the role where you're taking on more of a strategic perspective, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that also when we talk about this, like when we talk about leveling up, I think we should also talk about how that can mean different things in different places, right? Like it can mean I'm still an individual contributor on my team, but I have more impact or I do more strategic work. It could mean that you're like leading teams or mentoring other people. It could mean that there are lots of different definitions of this. And I think this is one thing that trips people up, especially in UX. And in a lot of tech careers, it's sort of like, it kind of feels like you can either be good at what you do or go down a management path. And that kind of feels like, sometimes it feels like those are the only two options.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to bring that up too, that like, as we are talking about this, the first thing that I like to remind people is that you first have to define what that looks like to you. Like, do you want to manage people? Like maybe you feel like mentoring people, but you don't want to officially manage them, or maybe you want to be a leader in some other way. So like examine that piece too. And think about what that means for you and your organization or the kind of organization you want to be at.
right.
Right. I tried that whole managing thing. It just didn't agree with me. I love mentoring people, but I don't like being the managing person and ending up with a team and being there's also that problem being middle management where you've got team responsibilities, but you've also got individual responsibilities too. Are you ready for that? Do you really want that? Is that something which you enjoy?
Right, and
Yeah.
I'll add to that. Basically, what was it? 12 years ago. I had a team. I was, middle management, I guess, working under the VP of the company, leading a team of, all research, but of staff, of contractors, and some kind of did their own projects and kind of came back to me. Others, I led the projects, and I said, it's okay. But then I went off, as a freelancer. So that said, I just got a question from them, well, you're working totally alone. No, I mean, rarely do I work totally alone. But then if I'm leading a project, it's of staff, contractors, and I'm doing at least half the work usually, if not more. So it's a different kind of leadership. There's no like growth path. And I also, I say to myself, I didn't dislike what I did before. It's just what I'm doing now, and it could flip back and forth. Like, okay, for now this is good. In the future, maybe I'll say, what, maybe that management track will be interesting, in the right setting to try. I don't know, but I'll also add one more thing to that, which was, for the first decade, really, not anymore, but for the first decade, I was very, very involved in UXPA leadership. And that kind of filled my leadership need. Like I wanted to, I wanted to do something kind of in a leadership, in some ways more of a thought leadership, but some ways actually kind of more management too. I did that for both the DC chapter and the international organization, and that kind of, for me, that was like okay, I have my leadership fix, and that was good enough. And then since, it's been a couple of years even since I've been doing that, and I've just, been happy as well. So you really can kind of flip back and forth. You can find your leadership in, like Amanda, like you said, you can find your leadership in different ways, for sure.
So starting at the bottom then, if somebody's been in a individual contributor role, they've been new to the company, they were hired as a kind of what's called a junior role. What did you look for as a manager of these people to say to you, I think they're ready for more responsibility?
Yeah, so I have something that I don't think is specific to UX, but I think is maybe particularly pertinent to a UX research role, which is that I was looking for people who were already influencing decisions, right? I was looking for people who were already taking what they learned from, say, a research study, and rather than just kind of like cranking out evaluation, we're trying to like make those strategic connections, and we're having conversations at a higher level at like, hey, we have found this insight across a bunch of different studies. Like, we need to do something more holistically about that, and whether that can take all kinds of different ways. And sometimes there are formal ways within companies you can do that. Sometimes it is completely informal, and so the part I think is UX agnostic is taking initiative, starting to do that kind of work before it becomes your role,
Yes.
in a way that
you have to be doing the role before somebody will give you the role, for sure.
Kind of, yeah. And you also, especially with depending on the situation you're in, you have to be sort of delicate about it and know how to sort of understand the politics of the situation and play within things. But one thing that I find is that if you want to be doing strategic work, you have to start by thinking strategically. And so if you want to have more influence, you need to begin by thinking bigger. You need to start by sort of making connections, to analyzing and synthesizing your data across all your different kinds of studies, not just looking at one at a time. You have to start doing that work yourself before anybody else is going to say, hey, we should ask for strategic advice. So if
but you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that on your own, though. I mean, yes, you need to be demonstrating you can do it, but you can have help. You can ask if you're in this junior role. You're like, you can go to your manager, to somebody else on your team who's more experienced, and say, hey, look, here's this problem. I want to really push this. How do I do that? And you can, anybody who wants to take on a mentoring position, or who understands helping other people rise up in the organization, is going to be, whoa, okay, yes, let's go. Let's help you do this. Let's help you be better at doing these kind of things. Yeah.
I would summarize it as, when kids are little and, they start shoving each other, and you're like, no, guys, use your words. It's someone who can use their words. I mean, that is the the like it's time to move up. You have the ability to move up is that you can use your words. You can articulate what you want to say in a meeting. You can articulate what you want to say in a slide deck, or in an email, or in a report, or whatever. You can articulate what you say. You say it coherently, and a manager does not need to come in and say, "Okay, you said that. That makes no sense." You I have no idea
So
what you're saying.
criteria number 1, makes sense.
Makes sense, right? Your words make sense. You say, look, I did this study, I did this design, I did whatever, and the reasoning is this, and the path forward is this, and that goes back to what you're saying about you've got to do it, be that leader, but it's using your language to make the case, justify what you've done, report on findings.
There's,
doesn't
there's a
matter.
massive piece of influencing without authority there, isn't there? I mean, which, hey, believe it or not, that happens whatever level in the organization you're in. It's just that the
True.
influence you're trying to have broadens to a broader group of people. But at this point, you're trying to influence your team, maybe a couple of other teams, to do things without actually being able to say, and do it because I told you to, right? And that's an interesting skill to learn. I think that is the use your words, isn't it? Is the influencing without authority. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
You can tell Cory has kids, right? Had kids like growing up, but
Yes. Yeah. I've been there. Use your words, guys. I mean, now they're old. Now it's like,
right.
Yeah, whatever. They're old. Yeah.
Well, and to go back to that influencing without authority thing, I think one of the things that, again, is not necessarily specific to UX or UX research, but I think maybe is particularly helpful for researchers, is that building relationships with people, not just on your immediate team, not just other UX researchers or other UX people, but building relationships with developers or product people or marketing or whoever you're trying to influence. They're a lot more likely to take your suggestions seriously if you have some sort of established relationship, even if you're not currently working on things together. If you'd like to be working on things together and you've never introduced yourself before, it's going to be a lot harder for them to kind of want to be having those conversations with you. So it seems sometimes, and I know that this is maybe a little harder in 2020, but it seems sometimes like it's wasted time to go out to lunch with people or have coffee with people, but it's not. It's really not.
And here's a tip: if you're one of those introvert people who just doesn't find it easy to have conversations with somebody like that, here's a tip: find a problem that you've got that you want to address with somebody who's in a similar role to this person, and say, hey, I need help working out how to say this to somebody. Can you help me? And as soon as you ask somebody to be experienced in something and help you out, they love it. They'll do all the talking. You can just listen, and they'll feel great for having given you something. So next time when you want to go to them, you can say, hey, I need some help fixing this thing which you're responsible for. Then, yeah, you've got your in.
Well, and also, a pet peeve is if I hear someone say, well, I'm an introvert, so I don't network. And introversion does not mean you don't talk to people. I mean, particularly in the pandemic, it's not like, well, I'm an introvert, so I'm totally cool being a hermit. I mean, that's not the point. Introvert is used as a synonym of I'm shy. And if someone's feeling shy, ultimately, you can take baby steps. You can kind of meet one-on-one. But meeting one-on-one is not, I mean, big group, sure. that can be very intimidating. To meet one-on-one with someone, you can feel shy and feel like, I feel awkward. I'm not sure what to say. But don't just say, well, I'm an introvert, I'm not going to network. Because networking, no matter what, is critical to success. It's knowing people. It's your future job at stake. It's really everything.
I think I've mentioned before, every single job I've got has been through knowing somebody and having them talk me up or introduce me or whatever else. And it's funny because I would definitely class myself as being introvert rather than extrovert. I do find it difficult to talk to people, to have conversations. Sure, there's this guy that stands in front of millions of people and gives talks. That's very different. That's not talking to somebody. That's presenting. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
they're very
but
different.
it's but I would say, looking back on my career, if there's one thing I wish I'd done more, it is broadening the network of people that I actually worked with on a regular basis, so that I could understand them better and they knew me better, so that when I then came to work with them one on one or in a group, we had that relationship going already. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, that's why I think it's also critical to get involved in whatever meetups, organizations. I mean, now obviously this year is harder, but only for so, I mean, only for a period of time. Even now, there's still virtual opportunities, and you know, and you know, even beyond that, when we are able to be all together again at meetups and such, you know, take the opportunity as soon as you can, when you can, because it's just so important. I mean, I just can't stress that enough.
So here we go then. We've got this, as managers, people who previously managed, we've said one of the things that really helps is to see somebody taking the initiative to do something that's beyond their junior role, to start thinking more strategically. They can have help doing that. If they come to me and ask for help, I'll be like, dude, yes, yes, because it really does suit your manager to have everybody in their team able to do this stuff. It takes some of the burden off of them. So yes, this person starts doing that. They start exhibiting these things. You give them a bit more responsibility. You say, okay, you're going to lead this project this time. They succeed. What's the net? What? How do you build on that as a manager? How do you start? Because I'm talking about it from a manager perspective, because I think we're more familiar with that than we are from back in the day when we were all junior people. And that's probably the way of helping folks who are listening who want to level up to do that, is by saying, well, here's what we expect your managers will want you to do. So what's next? You've given somebody experience for doing a project on their own. You're now in charge of running this project. They do it. They succeed. You maybe help coach them through how they're going to present the results. They present the results. The team's like, oh, yeah. And then they're pushing the team subsequently. The team does make the changes.
Well, so I think there's one critical thing here is sometimes you reach as high as you can get as long as the person who is above you is sitting where they are. So you know, you say, well, I've got my boss, and the boss isn't going anywhere. The boss is
Right.
perfectly happy. It's going to stay for a while. You may or may not be able. I mean, you can advance in responsibility within a very targeted parameter. But either you can move up or you can't. And if you can't, and you say, you know, I'm just not happy, or I need to move on, or I'm yearning for something, you know, higher up, the level up may happen at your existing job, or it may happen you're like, okay, it's time to move on. You know, jobs are plentiful. I'll find something else, or whatever. So there's two different pathways and two different answers to that question, depending on which pathway you're
Good
taking.
point. And if you're thinking of moving to a different job, then it's even more essential that you can demonstrate that you are able to perform at the role of the job you want, because assuming you're wanting a job at a higher level, you have to, if you're going into that job, you have to demonstrate that you can already do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, again, pulling more experience, getting things you can talk about in an interview. Yes, I ran this project. Yes, I led this team. Yes, I made these changes. These changes saved the company X amount of money. All those things are super important.
That was going to be a piece that I was going to talk to you, is that there, especially with UX, one of the ways that you can kind of set yourself apart from being like a producer of things, right? Whether you're producing wireframes or producing test reports, is to tie, like, to do the little bit of extra legwork, to tie what you've done into a return on investment result, right? And it's sometimes you're really lucky and it's super clear. Like if you work in an e-commerce business, it might be super clear to be like, we made this change and then we made this many dollars. It's not always that specific, but sometimes you can say, you know, the whole team in our, you know, I used to work on an internal agile team, and you know, in the team retrospectives, the process got a lot better, and we all, you know, we were able to be more effective, or that kind of stuff. So look for ways to not just be good at what you do, but be able to talk about it. That will do a couple things. One, that will tie together what you've done into the impact that you've had on the organization, right? So whether you save the support team money, or make more money from, you know, stuff you've sold, or just make your development process like easier for the team, or whatever it is, showing that you can think outside of the box of, well, I designed this wireframe or I tested this prototype. It's like, kind of thinking bigger than that, but then also tying the results to something bigger than that. And it also gives you confidence of something to talk about. If you say, well, I led this project, and they're like, cool, how'd it do? And you're like, good, I think.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. My manager said I did okay. You can have something concrete. Even if it's a little bit fuzzy, you can have something to back it up, and it makes you feel more confident when you're talking about whether it's going for a promotion internally or looking for another job, or
just to be clear, you don't have to say how much you contributed. You have to say this project saved the organization X amount of dollars, or brought in X amount more revenue, or whatever it was. Everybody's claiming a slice of that pie, and if it was true what everybody's slice was, it'd be like 5 pies rather than 1 pie. But what you're not saying, I made this happen. You're saying the project I contributed to had this effect on the organization.
Yeah. Although it is important to be able to specify, this is the part I did, and these are the people that I worked with, because the other thing that I was going to bring up is that it's really important to show that you can work with other people. If you want to have a more strategic job, you necessarily need to be more collaborative. You will need to work more with product and development and design and research, and the higher you go, the more cross-functional you have to be. So if you have only ever worked internally in a UX team, and you've never, look at that. Thanks, Andrew, for the great question. Yeah, exactly. So the higher level that you get, not only do you need to be able to tie your work, but you need to work with other groups of people, because the higher not higher level in terms of VP or director or whatever, but higher level in terms of the more strategic thinking, the more pieces that work is going to touch, and therefore the more people you need to collaborate with. So to Andrew's question, sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead. You go ahead. Do it.
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to pull up Andrew's question again, but so he asked if we could talk about our experiences working with teams outside of design, collaborating with engineers, PMs, etc. How has this worked well for you all, or has it not worked well?
That's up to you.
I mean, I would toss in there. You have to actually speak in a different language for each group of people. So, for example, project managers. When project managers, when I'm talking to a project manager, I'm talking about time, scope, and budget. Everything should be framed. How long is it going to take? What's the scope? How much is it going to cost? I mean,
how much time can I save that project manager?
Right. I mean, you speak in project management language. When you're talking to developers, you're talking about, how much will we have to adjust the code? What's going to be involved in the development? How will it maybe fit into kind of an agile development cycle? You're talking about, you have to talk in a development frame, and kind of perhaps the soft skill, and again, expanding beyond UX, is that when I think the success comes from being able to talk in the language that each group represents. And if you get to the point where you don't know the language, it's a new group. I've never worked with marketing people before. Okay, so before
their language is completely inaccessible to anybody else. But
so you say, okay, so what do I need? Okay, I haven't worked with a marketing team before. And by the way, it's the language is different in every company. So just because you speak to a team in one doesn't mean you'll be speaking exactly the same language, different jargon, different terminology, different philosophies. However, if you say, well, the marketing team, I've worked with them before. Pause for a second. Don't use your words. Just say, okay, let me hear from you. And then you might have to do that universal translator in your head and say, okay, you're saying this. I've worked with either previous marketing teams or not, but this is what it means. I'm going to translate in my mind what this is. I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to validate that I'm right or not, or I'm going to tweak, and I'm going to iterate my own understanding. And then you'll develop this translation ability with whatever team you're working with.
And you're talking about what they care about, right? What does marketing care about? What do PMs care about? What does dev care about? Because if you can fit in with what they care about, they're much more likely to do what you want than if you're like, no, you must do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that to that exact point, I would say it's not just about knowing their language. It's about designing their experience with you like you would design, an experience with a software. So to that exact point, I know that at one of the places that I worked before, there previous to my joining the team, there had been an outlook that like UX research slows things down. They come at the end and tell us all the stuff we messed up. So when I went in, I didn't do that at all. I went in and said, hey, if you let me test this right now before you've built it all the way out, I can save you time later, because when we get to the point, like when you're trying to make decisions on the fly about which way to implement something, I can give you that information. So you don't have to guess, and we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it. Like I can just give you data, and then we'll all be able to make a better decision. And then at the end, it'll probably do better, and like we'll all look good. Well, everyone wants to look good. And it's the same no matter who you're working with, right? And everybody's things are different, and everybody's things are different individually because just how people are, and at different organizations. The developers I've worked at all different organizations sometimes have really different needs depending on how they're set up and everything. So keep in mind, it's not a one size fits all solution, but it's a really important skill as a UXer. And regardless of what kind of path you're trying to take out, that is one of the key things that can differentiate a really successful UX person, is kind of getting to know and sort of being the translator between the different groups, whatever that looks like in your org.
I have to say, when I was more junior, I remember we actually did have a position called architect in the organization I was in at the time. I just didn't understand why that person was just always in meetings with all these other teams, all these other areas around the organization, showing them pictures, talking with them about stuff. I just didn't understand why they weren't doing work. I didn't understand at the time that their work was communicating, drawing consensus, socializing ideas amongst these groups of people, so that they would then all amenable to doing things the way that this architect wanted them to do, and that the politics around all this was just so complex, it was just completely over my head at that point. So yeah, I mean, this whole idea of talking with these different groups in their own language, being able to do that on multiple levels too. What does a dev manager want versus an individual developer? What does somebody who's the PM for a whole area want, rather than somebody who's working with an individual team? It's something you can only gain over time, again, which is why it's not something you expect a junior person to do, right? But the more you can do that, and the more you can demonstrate your capacity to do that, the more likely it is you'll get more opportunities to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Should we talk a little specifically? Well, and I think back to Andrew's question, I don't think that talking to other people has ever not been to my benefit. I don't know, do either of you have any times where that's not worked so well?
The only times it hasn't worked well is where I went in with an expectation. Where I went in with an expectation of something, right?
Oh, did we lose? Is everybody still here?
Yeah, I think we're all glitching, if I'm reading this correctly, which might mean an interface thing.
Just
no,
Cory. Just you.
Okay.
All right, my turn is next week apparently, because we're rotating turns. So who freezes each week?
Yeah, right. Let's do it. No, whoever leads.
Whoever
we got
hosts.
Interface though. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the only times where I had problems communicating with people was where I went in with expectations of what I wanted from it, and those expectations were not the same as the person who I was talking with. So yeah, I mean, really, it goes back to what we've already been saying. If you go with an open mind, if you go and understanding what they're expecting to get or wanting to get from delivering products, you're likely to be able to help them along the way and help yourself in the meantime.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that I guess to add to our list of kind of soft skill abilities is the idea to have an open mind. That you can advance. That's an advancement skill. You advance when you can hear other people. You can kind of, I guess, not just translate or whatever, but understand differences, understand where they're coming from, understand what their roles are. And if it doesn't make sense, then you work to understand what you're missing, perhaps, or at least make the assumption that you don't know something, not that you're just right and everyone else is wrong.
But I'm always right.
Yeah. I think it add to our list of soft skills of that helps advance when you say I'm a listener. I grow. I'm not stuck where I am and stuck in my knowledge and my assumptions, and that will help grow as a UX professional. I mean, and not just with teams you're working with, but the users of a product that you might be working on. Just kind of not going in with assumptions and challenging assumptions at all times when you can.
I guess to follow up on what my little interjection to Cory's thing, but I'm always right. The thing is, you can be right and they can be right.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right, because you want what's right for your users, so you're trying to force this change on whoever it is, the product manager, the dev team, whoever it is. But they're right too, because their thing they're measured on is delivering on time and to budget, right? So they're right and you're right is two different rights for two different audiences, and who's going to win? And often it's something where you have to balance those two things and come to some kind of compromise about what right actually means for the project.
Right. I mean, I think it's the zero-sum game kind of feeling that
Right.
either only one of us can be right because they both can't be true, and most of the time that's not the case, and it's true. I mean, that goes way beyond even workplaces. I mean, it's in politics, in personal life. It's you move through the world in a happier place, certainly, when you can say we can both be right. Both I can hold both in my mind. The cat is both dead and alive. It's okay. It's all good. But I mean, that's where you move on in life and move on in growth. Just by saying the rightness, we can all be right. I think that's a great point.
Well, and one thing to kind of point out, which I think we've sort of been dancing around, but we haven't specified, is that everything that we are talking about in terms of leveling up in a UX career is not specific to UX skills in terms of it's not learn a new prototyping tool. It's not make sure you know these 5 methods. It's not, so yeah, that stuff is important. And I think we've said this before, you need to have a baseline of knowledge to conduct the work. But the things that differentiate, in my mind, sort of a mid-level producer and a higher level, more strategic person are not necessarily their technical skills or their research skills or their design skills. I know some very talented, for instance, I know a very talented visual graphic designer, but who purposely doesn't really love to think strategically, doesn't want to. This person is very happy, what he says, pushing pixels, right? He likes that and he's okay with that. And he is very technically proficient, but he does not want to think about bigger picture things. And I know, other people who frankly have less good visual skills. They don't know as much about some of the different tools or whatever, but they want to think bigger and they are focused on that. And so I think there's kind of a couple things. One is that it is also okay if you just want to be really proficient at whatever your skill is and do that. That is okay. You don't have to think bigger strategically in order to be successful. We need people to be, frankly, if everybody was trying to think strategically all the time, there'd be nobody to Chris's point, everyone would be in meetings all the time. None of us would be doing anything. We need people to get hands-on dirty in the work. We just need both kinds of thinking. And it's also okay if you want to do some of both, but it's important to kind of have that self-reflection and decide what kind of path is interesting to you and that you're good at, that you're suited for. But then also to kind of recognize that the things that makes the difference between, say, a very technically proficient visual designer and a strategic UX designer with very high technical visual design skills are not the technical skills. They're the soft skills. They're the, the persuading and the collaborating and the thinking bigger picture. All of those things are somewhat agnostic, or they're not agnostic to UX, but they are not learn this new tool set and therefore you'll level up. That is almost never something that I have seen help somebody move from one stage of their career to another.
Yeah, it's more team building skills, isn't it? And unfortunately, it is a shame that in some organizations there's this expectation that everybody should always be progressing. And I think that's actually damaging to the organization. If somebody's really happy in a role, why would you force that? Why would you think less of them for that than saying, no, but you must develop your skills. You must. Yeah, it seems wrong. But
I
it
think,
happens.
and I think that you can still grow. I mean, if you're a subject matter expert, the best income, the best revenue is found by either being an expert, a super expert in your skill, such that people have utter confidence that when they need something designed or researched or whatever, you can totally do it, or to be a manager and make smooth pathways for everybody and the project and the program and whatever. But both of those are valid kind of, you can you can increase your salary, you can increase your kind of status, you're higher up. But both are totally valid, I think, to our earlier discussions.
I think some organizations have difficulty with that and don't actually have pathways for people to be individual contributors at a senior level. I know that that's something that I struggled with at a couple of places in the past, and have conversations with people about that at a regular basis. I don't want to go into management, but it's the only way of getting more money, or being promoted. To be promoted, I must take on team lead responsibilities. Yeah, so unfortunately, some organizations aren't there yet, but yeah. In an ideal situation, it should be very possible to keep going on a technical path rather than a managerial path. It's a shame when you can't, because there's a need for people with that skill level for sure.
Yeah, and to circle back to something Cory was mentioning earlier, I think that while I don't really recommend that people try to hop jobs every 6 months or so, I think it's also worth kind of examining like the organization that you're at or the situation that you're at. Like, are the kinds of paths available to you in the way that you want to level up? Like, maybe you really crave being a manager, but to Cory's point, like, there's only one UX manager and they're there and they're not leaving and your team's not growing, and like maybe you don't have an option. Maybe there are other ways that you could get that kind of experience, though. So again, for instance, I used to work in-house at a company that had agile teams. So I volunteered to be the scrum master for our team for a while. It wasn't ultimately what I wanted to do, but it gave me sort of a different slice of experience of things that I wasn't able to get in the role that I was in previously. There are almost always at every organization opportunities to expand, even if they're not laid out in your specific role. And this kind of goes back to something that I like to tell to people every time we talk about career stuff, is that just because nobody's offered it to you does not mean that it is not available to you. And that sounds so simple. But there are very few organizations in particular that have, like well laid out UX learning, like growth paths, right? There are very few companies that have a very well laid out, sort of graduation path to different levels. But if you're interested in learning something and you go to your manager, or even, again, this also goes to that like building relationships thing, maybe you just want to learn more about project management because that's a potential path for you. Like maybe you want to do some of that more strategic product level thinking. You could ask someone on that team for some advice, or you could offer to do some research for them, or you could, offer to do, to help them take notes on something they're doing, or whatever it is, right? Like there's almost always an opportunity for you to learn more, but you almost always have to ask for it. So don't be afraid to ask. I know that's easy for me to say, but, and you might not even know what you're asking for, right? But I have very rarely been in circumstances where a hungry, interested employee who is like, I'm getting a little bored, or I really want to grow, I really want to learn, that an organization has just been like, too bad for you, right? Like almost always, if you show that initiative that you would like to learn something new, people will help you figure that out, whether it's your boss or a team member or something else. So
right. It also kind of a good way to think about it is that your job may or may not last for many years. So you work under the assumption that you're always growing, you're always learning, you're always progressing. Whether it's, I mean, if you can't progress in one way that you want, progress in another way. I mean, you can always learn. You can always watch those LinkedIn learning videos or other sources of learning, or read books or blogs or whatever. But assume that you might have to one day move on, and be prepared for that. Be prepared with your portfolio and your resume, and don't let anything go stale. And even though it takes time outside of work, prepare for it while hoping, if you're happy at your job, you can be there for 10 years or more. So it really, it's really kind of a good approach. And I've seen people kind of say, you know what, I'm not updating anything. I'm just so happy here. And then, oops, we're having layoffs. What do I do now? Oh no, I didn't work on my network. I didn't go to any events. I didn't whatever. And then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. I wish in my past I had always had a business case document for Chris, independent of my work. But I mean, for instance, it even helps at annual review time. If you're in an organization that does annual reviews, it's like, well, what did Chris do last year? Well, let's see. Chris already has this stuff written down. He doesn't have to go scrambling for it 2 days before his annual review thing is due. He's got it written down. Hey, I'm talking about myself in the third person. But yeah, having that, regardless of whether you're happy in your role or not, it serves so many purposes. What if you're having a conversation with somebody in the organization that you want to work with, they're like, well, why should I work with you? And you can say, well, I've done these things in the last year.
Yeah.
And that's a job interview, right? You want to go work with a product manager to learn what they do. Why would I care about you? You're a UX person. Well, look, here's what I'm doing in my career. Here's what I want to do. Here's these things I've done. Let me show you. This is why I want to work with you. Oh, that makes sense. But if you've not got that business case of Chris sorted out already, it's going to be much harder to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I also think to that other point is that it's a good way to build confidence. I know that certainly I myself, like, especially when I've gotten really busy, it's sometimes hard to just like keep track of all of the things that have gone on. And I remember actually at one of my past jobs sitting down at the end of the year to be like, all right, so what did I do this year? And the list was so long, and I had to go back. It took me a lot of time to go back through, but I was like, wow, look at all that stuff I did. And I bet my boss would not have remembered at all if I had not done that exercise and gone through. And so the other thing is if you want to level up in whatever way that is, you have to be an advocate for yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to be like asking for a raise all the time, but it does mean being aware of your own both strengths and weaknesses, and advocating for, hey, remember that project I did last year that was really successful and great? How about you let me do another one of those? Or let's look for opportunities for me to try out this other stuff. And it kind of goes to what you were saying with like being aware. And I know that, again, that sounds silly, but like I lose track of stuff all the time that I've worked on. And if you've got, when I think the biggest team I ever managed was like 15 or 16 people at the biggest. I couldn't keep track of every single thing that everybody was doing all the time. And I found it really helpful as a manager when somebody came in and said, here are the 3 things that I was like most proud of this year. And I was like, oh, you're right. That's great.
Good job. Yes, I remember all of those now.
I remember all of those. And also, you took work off my plate. So thank you.
Yeah, it's also, an idea could be to keep a either like in somehow tag compliments that you get, over email, over text, whatever.
We do that with our usability studies, right? We have participant quotes, and the quotes are really super powerful. We have colleague quotes.
Them about your work, and then one, it makes you feel good whenever you're like having a hard day, and you're like, oh, look at all these happy people. But 2, you lose track of it. So you're like, well, I don't remember who liked my work, whatever. But it's good. It's also good kind of just to remember and to remind yourself. You don't even have to do anything with it, but just have it, certainly. So, okay, with that, I think we're kind of running out of time now, and I think we've said all the most important stuff. Anyway, I'm sure we'll think of lots of great stuff. Or watching it, like, oh well, what about talking about this too? But yeah, no, I think we had a great discussion about kind of not just where we were last week about starting out, but kind of moving on and what's next. So we will have one more session of the year, which will be next week. Although I won't be there. It will just be you guys. I'll be actually having to do some research. But no. So this is my last time saying hi to everyone, saying have a nice holiday season, having a good new year to everyone. I won't be back till January. However, you will see Chris and Amanda. I'm also going to put in a quick plug. Tonight, which is 8 o'clock my time, I'm doing a talk about being a freelance researcher for the LAUX meetup, along with some little panel discussions. So you can look up the LAUX research meetup and find us there. Okay, so with that, feel free, again, a reminder, follow all of us on LinkedIn for reminders about when upcoming episodes. Find us on Twitter at Stickynotes Chat. Find our website of the old episodes, including this one, if you want to watch it again or pass it on. It will be not only on LinkedIn but on stickynotes.chat. And let people know about us. And yeah, it's been fun.
Always.
And reach out, of course, if you've got questions for us. Otherwise, we will see you next week.